Caleb Bennett had spent 20 years investigating other people's secrets. He never imagined his most devastating case would be investigating his own wife's betrayal. The text message on Rachel's laptop made his blood run cold. Tyler and Sophie barely know him anyway. He's always traveling for cases. We'll make sure they understand he picked work over family. Sitting in his basement office at 2:47 a.m., surrounded by surveillance equipment and evidence of 18 months of deception, Caleb realized his wife wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to steal his children and destroy everything he'd built. The Victorian house in Portland's Hawthorne district had been their dream when they bought it 9 years ago. Rachel had fallen in love with the hardwood floors and the view of Mount Hood. Now those same walls felt like they were closing in on him as he read through months of communications between his wife and her lover, detailing plans that would leave him with nothing. Rachel Bennett, formerly Rachel Montgomery, was a commercial real estate broker with auburn hair and steel gray eyes who'd once made him believe in possibilities beyond his foster care upbringing. They'd met at a charity auction in 2014, married 8 months later, and for the first few years, Caleb had thought he'd finally found his place in the world. He'd been wrong about that too. Their kids, Tyler and Sophie, had come along 4 years into the marriage. At 9 years old now, they were the center of Caleb's world. Sophie had inherited her mother's sharp mind, but her father's stubborn sense of fairness. She could argue her way out of bedtime, but always owned up when she'd done something wrong. Tyler was quieter, an artist who saw the world in colors and possibilities, reminding Caleb of his younger sister Jenny before the war had taken her. If you enjoy stories about betrayal, revenge, and the lengths a father will go to protect his children, please like this story and subscribe to our channel right now. Every day we bring you completely new stories, each one more gripping than the last. The first crack had appeared 7 months ago during a routine security sweep of his home network. Caleb made it a practice to check his systems monthly, paranoia earned through years of investigating people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. This time, he'd found anomalies that made his chest tighten with recognition. Hidden financial transactions, encrypted communications, hotel reservations under names that weren't quite right. He'd stared at the data for 20 minutes, his coffee growing cold, hoping he was wrong. But 20 years of following digital breadcrumbs had taught him to trust his instincts, even when they led somewhere he didn't want to go. The investigation that followed was the most straightforward of his career. 20 years of tracking betrayers had prepared him for exactly this scenario. Every piece of evidence was another tool in his arsenal, every lie another weapon to be used when the time came. Oliver Reeves had been Caleb's friend before he'd been Rachel's business partner. They'd met at a barbecue hosted by mutual friends, bonded over their shared military experience. Oliver had done 2 tours in Iraq with the Marines. When Rachel had mentioned wanting to start her own commercial real estate firm, Caleb had been the one to suggest she partner with Oliver. "He's solid," Caleb had told her over dinner one night, watching her excitement as she outlined her business plan. "Good instincts, honest, knows how to work with people. You could build something real together." The irony of those words now felt like a knife twisting in his gut. The affair had been going on for 18 months, but as Caleb dug deeper, he realized the betrayal went much further back. Text messages revealed that Rachel and Oliver had been discussing Caleb's limitations almost from the beginning of their business partnership. "He's never going to understand what we're trying to build here," Rachel had written to Oliver 2 years ago. "He thinks small, always has." Foster kid mentality, grateful for scraps instead of reaching for what he deserves. Oliver's response, "He's a good investigator, but you're right about the vision thing. Some people are just wired to work for other people instead of building empires." But it was the recent messages that revealed the true scope of their mistake. They'd underestimated the man they were targeting. "The prenup won't matter if we can prove professional misconduct," Oliver had written 3 months ago. "Your mother's connections in family court will ensure you get everything, including full custody." Rachel's response made Caleb's blood run cold. Tyler and Sophie barely see him anyway. He's always traveling for cases. "We'll make sure the judge understands he chose work over family. Catherine will handle the custody hearing personally." As Caleb read through months of planning, he realized they'd been documenting his every absence, every late night at the office, every business trip. They'd been building a case against him, while he'd been working to provide for what he'd mistakenly believed was his family. The next morning, after Rachel left for work and the kids were at school, Caleb began preparing his counterattack. Not because he wanted to destroy his wife, but because she'd chosen to be his enemy. What he found over the following weeks changed everything. Rachel's family, the Montgomerys, had old Portland money and the kind of political connections that came with it. Her mother, Judge Catherine Montgomery, had been on the Superior Court bench for 22 years. Her father, Harold, owned Montgomery Restaurant Group, upscale establishments that catered to the city's power brokers. They'd always treated Caleb with polite condescension, the kind reserved for people they considered temporary fixtures in their daughter's life. Christmas dinners where Harold would ask pointed questions about Caleb's little security business. Family gatherings where Catherine would wonder aloud why Rachel was limiting herself by staying in Portland. Caleb had always assumed their coldness came from snobbery. He'd never considered that it might be strategic. The breakthrough came when he was researching Catherine's judicial record for any potential conflicts of interest in a custody case. What he found buried in sealed court files from 14 years ago made him understand that the Montgomery family's wealth wasn't just old money, it was blood money. March 15th, 2:17 a.m., Interstate 5, just south of Portland. Antonio Castelli had been driving his family home from his daughter Isabella's Sweet 16 party when Jason Whitmore's BMW slammed into their van at 85 miles per hour. Antonio, 45, his wife Maria, 42, Isabella, 16, Marco, 12, all dead instantly. Jason Whitmore, 23, son of prominent businessman Charles Whitmore, had fled the scene with a blood alcohol content of 24. When his father's lawyers finally brought him in 14 hours later, the case should have been slam-dunk vehicular manslaughter. Instead, Judge Catherine Montgomery had sentenced him to 2 years probation and community service. The financial records told the rest of the story. Charles Whitmore had made substantial campaign contributions to Catherine's re-election fund, $75,000 in the weeks following his son's sentencing. More damning, Charles Whitmore was Harold Montgomery's silent partner in 3 restaurant ventures. But the truly sickening part was what had happened to the Castelli family's business. Antonio and Maria had owned Castelli Catering, a small but growing company that specialized in authentic Italian cuisine. In the months before their deaths, they'd been competing aggressively with Montgomery Restaurant Group for several major contracts. After the family died, those contracts had somehow ended up with Montgomery Restaurant Group. The Castelli recipes, client lists, and even some of their kitchen equipment had been purchased from the estate for pennies on the dollar. An entire family had been murdered by a drunk driver, and the Montgomerys had profited from their deaths. But what Caleb discovered next would change everything. Caleb spent 3 days verifying every detail, cross-referencing financial records, tracking down witnesses. By the time he was finished, he had enough evidence to destroy not just Catherine's judicial career, but to send her to federal prison. He also had the leverage he needed to win. The morning Dennis Walsh showed up at his office was the day Caleb had been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. Rachel's lawyer was everything he'd expected. Silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of practiced arrogance that came from years of intimidating people into settlements. "Mr. Bennett," Walsh said, settling into the chair across from Caleb's desk without being invited. "I think we can resolve this matter quickly if you're reasonable about the realities of your situation." Caleb glanced at the divorce papers Walsh slid across his desk. The terms were exactly what he'd expected from intercepting Rachel and Oliver's communications. Total custody to Rachel, substantial alimony and child support, supervised visitation every other weekend, subject to appropriate behavioral standards. "Your wife has documented your pattern of prioritizing work over family obligations," Walsh continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Your frequent absences, your inability to maintain consistent involvement in your children's daily lives, your children's stated preference to remain with their mother." Walsh leaned back, his smile cold. "Frankly, Mr. Bennett, your children barely know you. They see you as the man who pays the bills, not as a father. This arrangement simply formalizes what's already true." Caleb had been preparing for this moment for months. Hearing Walsh dismiss his relationship with Tyler and Sophie was irrelevant. He'd expected exactly this approach. He'd also prepared for it. His children knew him. They loved him, and he was going to ensure they stayed with him. "There's something you should see before we proceed," Caleb said, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents and photographs, and placed it on the desk between them. "What is this?" Walsh asked, his confidence flickering slightly. "Insurance," Caleb said simply. "Make sure your client and her family understand what's at stake here." That evening, Caleb's phone began ringing. He sat in his office, Tyler and Sophie playing video games in the living room above him, and listened to his life unravel through voicemail messages. Rachel first, her voice high and panicked. "Caleb, what the hell is this? Where did you get these documents?" This is ancient history. It has nothing to do with our marriage. Then Oliver, his military composure cracking. You son of a bitch, you think you can blackmail us? This is extortion! You can't prove any of this. Finally, at 12:43 a.m., Catherine Montgomery. Her voice was ice cold with rage, but underneath it, Caleb could hear something he'd never heard from her before. Fear. Answer your phone, Caleb. We need to discuss this immediately. He picked up on the fourth ring. Good evening, Catherine. How dare you threaten my family with some ancient court case? What do you want? Justice, Caleb said simply. Something the Castelli family never got. Something your family stole from them. The envelope had contained everything. Sealed court documents, financial records, photographs of Catherine and Harold celebrating their restaurant partnerships days after the sentencing, witness statements from people who'd been too frightened to speak up 14 years ago. You can't prove any of this, Catherine said, but her voice lacked conviction. I can prove all of it. Bank records, campaign contributions, witness statements, even audio recordings from people who worked in the courthouse during the trial. I have Maria Castelli's sister on record, describing how your family's lawyers approached her about selling the business assets before the bodies were even buried. The line went silent. What do you want? Catherine asked finally. Rachel withdraws the divorce papers. Oliver sells his share of Montgomery Reeves to my shell company. Rachel accepts joint custody with me as primary physical guardian, and you resign from the bench. That's impossible. The alternative, Caleb interrupted, is federal investigation into judicial corruption, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The alternative is the Castelli family finally getting their day in court with evidence that will destroy everything your family built on their graves. What followed was 10 days of systematic pressure. Rachel tried tears, threats, attempted seduction, promises they could work things out. Oliver hired investigators to find dirt on Caleb's past. The Montgomery family used every connection they had. All of it was irrelevant. Caleb had spent months preparing for exactly these responses. But the real break came when Caleb made a discovery that changed everything. Oliver hadn't just been planning to steal Rachel from Caleb. He'd been planning to steal everything from both of them. But what Rachel didn't know would shock her to the core. Financial records showed that over the past 8 months, Oliver had been systematically transferring assets from Montgomery Reeves into offshore accounts. Bank surveillance footage showed him meeting with Kelly Murphy, a woman Rachel had never heard of, someone who worked for a shell company based in the Cayman Islands. Oliver wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was cheating on his mistress too. When Caleb presented this evidence to Rachel during their final confrontation in Walsh's conference room, he watched her realize she'd been played by everyone, her lover, her family's enemies, and most completely by her husband. You're lying, she said, staring at the photographs of Oliver and Kelly together. I've never lied to you, Caleb replied. That was your mistake, not mine. The documents Rachel signed that day gave Caleb everything he'd planned to take. Full custody, the house, the business assets. Rachel kept only what he allowed her to keep. It wasn't vindictive. It was simply the logical outcome of a war she'd started and lost. But Catherine Montgomery was a different story. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Catherine resigned from the bench amid a federal investigation that ultimately resulted in her pleading guilty to judicial misconduct and conspiracy charges. She received 3 years in federal prison and permanent disbarment. Harold Montgomery's restaurant empire collapsed under the weight of civil suits filed by the Castelli family survivors, who finally received not just financial compensation, but public acknowledgement of what had been done to them. 6 months later, Caleb sat in his kitchen, helping Sophie with her math homework, while Tyler worked on a painting at the breakfast bar. The house was quieter now, more efficient. Rachel had visitation rights every other weekend, supervised until further notice. The anger between them had settled into something more useful, complete indifference. Dad, Sophie said, looking up from her multiplication problems. Why did you and Mom get divorced? Your mother made some bad choices, he said simply. Actions have consequences. Are you sad about it? Tyler asked. No, Caleb said. I'm not sad about it at all. The phone in his office rang, and Caleb recognized the number. Another potential client seeking his particular combination of investigation skills and flexible ethics. Bennett Investigations, he answered. Mr. Bennett? My name is Patricia Hawkins. Detective Morrison gave me your number. He said you were the kind of investigator who understood that sometimes the system doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Caleb leaned back in his chair, reaching for a notepad. What can I help you with, Mrs. Hawkins? I think someone is trying to kill me. she said quietly. "And I think it might be someone I trust." Outside, he could hear his children playing in the backyard he'd fought to keep. The sound was satisfactory. Everything had proceeded according to plan. In this business, there was always another case, another betrayer who needed to learn that actions had consequences. Caleb Bennett had learned that lesson in foster care, refined it in the military, and perfected it in his marriage. He'd built his life on a simple principle: those who showed mercy to their enemies were doomed to be destroyed by them. He'd never made that mistake, and he never would. "Tell me everything, Mrs. Hawkins," he said, pen ready. "Start from the beginning." If you enjoyed this story about a father's fight for justice and the price of betrayal, please like this video and leave a comment letting me know what you think. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.